Hello and welcome to another standard video here in the preview event for Secrets of Strixhaven, which introduces some pretty exciting cards. And the first card I wanted to build around is Mathemagics, double X and double blue for a sorcery, saying target player draws 2 to the power of X cards. This is the first time we're seeing this particular notation. So for x equals 0, draw 1 card, x equals 1, draw 2, x equals 2, draw 4, and so forth. So the goal here is to use Mathemagics as our win condition, because we can indeed also target our opponent with it. So at x equals 6, we can make our opponent draw 64 cards, and usually if they're running 60 cards, this will mill them out in one go and immediately win us the game. So the goal is to cast Mathemagics for x equals 6, which requires 14 mana total, which may seem like a lot, but once you consider the resonating Lute, it's not that hard to get to 7 lands in play, because now lands we control can tap to generate 2 mana of any one color that we can spend on instant and sorcery spells. Can also occasionally tap the Lute and draw a card, but only if we have 7 or more cards in hand. So this is really the combo: get the Lute in play, get 7 lands, and then Mathemagics for x equals 6 will win us the game. The good news is that Mathemagics is still a reasonable card draw effect in a ramp deck that can put a lot of lands in play, and we can just draw a whole bunch of cards with this in the meantime while we're building towards a lethal Mathemagics in case we end up drawing multiples. And the Lute is also very powerful and just doubling our mana, and we can cast it as early as turn 3 thanks to our many 2 mana ramp cards, which all put additional lands into play. We've got the Shared Roots, can select any basic land. Glimpse can only find forests, which is why we're only running 2 copies, but I'm also playing the full set of the new Studios first tier. The only drawback is that we need to first cast the 1 mana 1/1. It does enter prepared, and then we can ramp and growth afterwards. So we can cast this on turn 1. The mana base supports green on turn 1 pretty reliably with 14 untapped sources, and then turn 2 we can ramp and growth if it didn't get removed, and then still potentially cast or Lute on the following turn. Then we also have some interaction with 2 copies of Pyroclasm to deal 2 damage to each creature, as well as the new Splatter technique. Can either draw 4 cards, which is useful in the slower, more controlling matchups, or we can deal 4 damage to each creature and each planeswalker. So the versatility here is quite nice. And then we also have 2 copies of Aetherize, which can return all attacking creatures to their owner's hand, which can also be a way to stall for time, the only real fog effect we have available in Standard. And then we can also pair it very nicely with the new Proctor's Gaze, which is a bounce spell that also ramps us. So now if our opponent wants to play around Aetherize and only attacks with 1 creature, we can still bounce it with a Gaze and get ahead of mana. If they play around Gaze and attack all out, then of course we can maybe get them with an Aetherize. So it's nice to have the versatility there too. And then we've got some more ramp and card draw with Lessons from Life, drawing 3, putting a land from our hand onto the battlefield tapped. And then we also have 2 copies of Mind into Matter as another X draw spell, drawing X cards for X blue and a green, and then we can put a permanent card with mana value X or less from our hand onto the battlefield tapped. So we can always just put a land into play with this, making it kind of a bigger version of the Lessons from Life if we sink more mana into it. But we can also maybe cast it for x equals 4, which then puts a resonating Lute into play for us for free, which will then maybe set up a lethal Mathemagics on the following turn. So that's another nice interaction. And then the mana base, as I've mentioned, needs to have enough green sources to support the first tier on turn 1 and our 2 mana ramp cards. And then we also want plenty of basics that we can find with all those ramp and growth effects. And then I'm also including 2 copies of the Mistrise Village to make our spells uncounterable, which can be important against control. So we make sure that our Mathemagics for x equals 6 doesn't get countered. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the play, missing a little bit of early ramp. Although if I draw 4th land, we can Gaze and then set up the technique. So it's not the worst. But of course hoping to draw one of my many 2 mana ramp cards. Turn 1 Momo. Another Aetherize, alright. And a Shepherd, so that can tutor up another 1-drop. At least the technique looks decent in the matchup. Pixie can pick up the Shepherd before it goes away. So they got some good value. I'll take a shared roots. Get my second red source. So we're just a land away from technique. Opponent will be expecting a board wipe, I'm sure. We kind of have 4 of them in hand. So we just want to keep developing our mana, getting ahead on cards, while keeping the board clear. Because just bouncing all the opponent's creatures, while it buys us time, doesn't necessarily progress our own plan. Opponent gets to replay all their stuff and get more value. So we do want to make sure we're still putting extra lanes in play at least. Alright, first year I cannot play and Rampant Growth. So is this Proctor's Gaze turn, maybe? Could also Aetherize, if I don't want to take more damage. Alright, the Hope Singer now can pump the team. So we'll see what happens. And go, Ninja, go. That's why they're splashing red. Just to get +1 counters on the team. So this triggers regardless, even if I bounce it with a Gaze. So I think we're going for Aetherize. And then now I don't mind a main phase Gaze. And get a forest. And then we've got Technique for days, can maybe use 1 to draw 4. So Momo into Shepherd, into Pixie probably. And then Flickering the Shepherd's also good value. Yeah, I guess we'll draw 4. I don't think I'm in danger of dying next turn. Famous last words. And then could go for first year. Might give them more targets for the Hope Singer. Just put in the starting town, I guess. And then Stomping Ground can probably go. So we'll see if they can present lethal. At the very least, they're not gonna run out of cards anytime soon. Sage of the Skies. Alright, so opponent is now putting a bit more pressure on the board. So Splatter Technique to wipe the board could be warranted. Opponent actually picking up the Sage with the Pixie, just to make sure they have another copy in hand that they can access. And eroding the Pixie just to search for an extra land. Yeah, that's the versatility of that card. So we end up taking 7. But luckily their creatures are still within range of the Technique, which I now have to cast pretty much. And then I can still play the first year. Could also hang on to it so it doesn't get exiled by a Seam Rip, which they could still have. I'll run it out. So I should be able to buy myself a few more turns. But yeah, still waiting for the Lute. And eventually the Mathemagics. Pixie picks up the Sage again. So they always have one in hand. There's a Lute, that's a big one. So play the Lute. And then I'll be able to Rampant Growth, only using 1 land. And then I can pass with Gaze and Aetherize available. If our opponent makes me, I can Aetherize. If not, maybe bouncing one creature keeps me alive. And then I probably need to hold this to draw 4, because we're running out of steam. Hoping they don't have a way to answer artifacts. Get Lost only hits enchantments. Ooh, a Lorehold the Historian. Okay. Excited to see that in action. All out attack. We Aetherize. Halia is back. Pixie's back. Can replay the drum. And then still have a mana left over. Yeah, this Momo deck is very persistent. I'll say that much. 38 life, not an issue when we're planning to mill them out. Alright, so now Pyroclasm, a clean answer to the 2 Pixies. And then Technique and draw. And I'll make sure to use a Lute while we have 7 cards in hand to draw 1 more. Alright, so Pyroclasm. And then could Mind into Matter for a whole bunch, just to make sure we have the Mathemagics for next turn. Not afraid of any, well, I should rephrase, they do have a haste creature, so I do need to keep Gaze available actually. So let's maybe tap more carefully. So this way I'm keeping up Proctor's Gaze, so I could still Mind into Matter for X equals 7. Yeah, I guess that's fine. Put in another Lute. And then we've got the Mathemagics for next turn. Discard 4 cards, Starting Town, Stomping Ground, Glimpse, and another land. Alright, so just need to survive 1 more turn. And there's Loreholds. Alright, so bounce it, hope they can protect it. That works. And if our opponent taps out, they would do me a favor. I doubt they have a redirect lightning, because they could have redirected the Gaze. But it would be funny if they redirected this. But yeah, X equals 6. Should do it. There we go. Awesome. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw. Our hands maybe a little sketchy if we don't draw another land, but we technically have all the tools we need. Some early ramp, a Lute into Mathemagics. But we do want to be hitting our land drops naturally as well, at least early on. Alright, the bat will have a look. Can maybe take the Lute as the more unique permanent. And then we'll need to find removal before we get it back. Yep. Right, a land is good. Can ramp and growth for an island. And then I guess I may as well attack. Don't expect any haste creatures out of black-white. More of a flyer, maybe bat deck. And a Dark Star's pretty nice here, with a discount from Momo. Pyroclasm is good too. Alright, I guess we'll attack and see if they want to block with Augur. I doubt it. Ooh, this is juicy. And we'll glimpse again. Momo's back. And another bat. Probably takes a Lute again. Although now Gaze can also bounce it. And the technique isn't bad, although with double forest I currently cannot cast it. So what's my plan? I guess play the first year and then wait until end of turn to bounce the Deep Cavern Bat so they cannot replay it. Sure. And then I'll get to play the Lute, they can replay the bat, take Mathemagics, but I'll have a technique to wipe the board. At least that's the plan. Augur once again now with Offspring. So yeah, Splatter technique is looking good. I guess I regret not just going for Rampant Growth now. I guess I can bounce the first year. And then get an island. Untap and splatter. And replay the first year. And I think we're finally gonna get to play the Lute. Zarlin can maybe get back some hand disruption next turn. Ooh, Might into Matter is even better now. Can cast it for 4, put in the Lute. The first year is patiently waiting to Rampant Growth. And we'll finally get to it. Alright, so they need to take Mathemagics, but we drew a second copy, so unless they find an answer to the Lute, they should be dead. And Lunar Convocation's fine. Yeah, trying to think what new cards this deck has picked up. I'm sure there's some Silver Quill cards, maybe the 2-mana Charm that has made its way into the deck. Alright, so x equals 6. And that'll do it. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw with a keepable hand. Shared Roots can get an island. And then we have our win conditions, so ideally find the Lute at some point to double our mana. Vapmir, so our opponent could be on the Pox deck, which makes us sacrifice half of our permanents. That would be a problem. Do have some interaction here with the Gaze. Yeah, Slasher, and then they'll also have the Bloodletter. So we're probably bouncing the Slasher here. Right, Deep Cavern Bat resolves. They can see the technique, which I can cast next turn, since we'll Gaze for a mountain. And that's what they take. Alright, still gonna bounce a Slasher here, buys us more time. Pyroclasm deals with the bat. So, Mind over Matter for 4, could maybe draw into the Lute and put it in play. Yeah, I guess that's fine. I'll land this. So we've got plenty of card draw. Now I could Pyroclasm and then still Technique afterwards. Although honestly, I don't think that's necessary. As long as we bounce the slasher, we're not taking all that much damage. So then I can just Lessons from Life and then Proctor's Gaze afterwards. Right, put in a land. The first year could also maybe chump, but don't want to count on it. Opponent goes to attackers. They might immediately replay the slasher this time. And then get another mountain, maybe. Slasher's back. Alright, so still pretty far from a lethal Mathemagics. We can, however, Pyroclasm, get our technique back. Play the first year. Rampant Growth with it. Shared Roots, and then still have Proctor's Gaze available. And if they give me the chance to chum block, I'll take it. Better Triumph triggers Vadmir. Still bouncing Slasher. And draw another technique. How much mana am I working with? Well, this is 14 mana, so X equals 6 should do it. And there we go. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw with what looks like a Keeper. Turn 1 first year, turn 2 Rampant Growth. And then we've got double Gaze. Opponent on some sort of fractal deck. For now I think Forest is fine. Next turn Starting Town. So mono green so far. Don't love the fact that we have to include a creature in the deck, since otherwise opposing spot removal would be useless. But at least we can get value from the first year pretty quickly, at which point we don't care if it dies. So yeah, this turn will Rampant Growth. Get an island. Next turn I can play the Lute, or we can interact a bit more. Opponent is curving out pretty nicely. And yeah, Scrap Shooter could also destroy artifacts, so they could have another one of those. I'll wait to chump next turn. So, don't really want to bounce the Scrap Shooter, given the Lute. But maybe that's still the play, just to buy myself a bit more time. Then next turn I can at least loot into Glimpse right away, or loot into Gaze, we'll see. Could also reset the Augmenter. Yeah, that's a Surak. So they have Formidable enabled, one way or the other. So, yeah, this is an interesting spot. We can just bounce Surak himself. Still take a lot of damage, or I can bounce the Augmenter, chump Surak, and then next turn maybe bounce Surak. And this will have lost its counters. Yeah, I think we'll try that. Just checking, this only triggers when it dies. And then get another... Does it matter? Maybe island. Fall to 5. Okay, Mountain to Matter would have been nice, but While I can cast it for x equals 4, put in the Lute, that leaves me dead on board. Although, yeah, going Lute into Gaze still leaves me dead on board. So I think we're just dead here. Unless Mind into Matter finds something else that can save me, but I don't think so. Yeah, just a little bit too much pressure too quickly. Slumbering Trudge can also enable Surak, so bouncing Surak is pretty good value here, but we're still taking 7. So yeah, if we had a Mathemagics in hand, this would have been pretty close. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with what looks like a Keeper. Turn 1 first year. Turn 2 hopefully Rampant Growth. And then we've got a bit of interaction, some card draw. Opponent on aggro. Well, now we don't mind trading away the first year for a headliner. So it's Mardu colors. Speed up to 2. And a Harrier, so this is a very low curve deck. So finding one of our sweepers would be nice. For now, hang on to the Gaze. Suki is next. Alright, so we can bounce the 3-drop, I'm guessing. And then Mind into Matter for x equals 4. Hope to draw the Lute, which we did. So then next turn, if I top deck Mathemagics, we could already win the game. Suki's back. Alright, so at the very least we can splatter technique to wipe the board. Although drawing 4 is also tempting. I guess I can tap the Lute first while we have 7 cards in hand to draw. Can't forget about that. So, yeah, interesting spots. If I draw 4, I'll still be able to play the first years, although I have to be careful because I don't actually have a ton of green sources on the battlefield. If I wipe the boards, I guess next turn we can maybe draw with a Lute again. Yeah, it's gotta be safer. Probably could have tapped a little bit better. Yeah, let's see. I guess I don't play a land out, so next turn I can draw off Lute. A Voice of Victory is next. And a Harrier. So we'll draw. And that's game over. Alright, so x equals 6. Just double checking that they're not playing more than 60 cards to begin with. And there we go. Awesome. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw with a decent looking hand. Shattered Roots for islands, turn 3 Lute. We've got the Pyroclasm for interaction. And a Splatter technique as well. Right, a Scheming Silver Tongue, so maybe a black-green life gain deck. Have to be careful not to play too many forests, because we can only afford one for the technique. Alright, Sentinel is next, so definitely looks mid-rangey in nature. Wish I could wait on the Lute, so I could just put it in play with Mind into Matter, but that requires x equals 6, which isn't happening anytime soon. So I think we just play the Lute and hope it doesn't get removed. And then next turn we can do some damage with the technique. Opponent grows a Silver Tongue in the hopes of getting a +1 counter, so they can prepare it. Although, yeah, hopefully both creatures stay at 4 toughness, so they die to the technique. See the Tragedy Feaster, so they might have some demon synergies too. Oh, this lines up perfectly for Splatter technique. So I'll need to tap 3 lands. And then I guess I'm not doing anything else. Yeah, I could still Mind into Matter for x equals, let's see here, 3. Draw 3 cards, is that worth it? Maybe it is. Put an extra land into play as well. And then do I already have lethal here? I think I do. X equals 6. Well, that was pretty smooth. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. This is a pretty awkward opener with triple forest, no blue mana. So I don't think I can keep. This is better. Turn to Shared Roots. Do I keep Mind into Matter or Mathemagics? So let's say we cast this for x equals 2. We get to draw 4 for 6 mana, so it's equivalent to Mind into Matter, except we don't get to put a land in play, or maybe a Lute. But it's also our win condition, so I think I keep the Mathemagics here. And then Gaze is both interaction and ramp. Can get another mountain. Opponent's a black-white life gain deck, maybe a Reanimator. Yeah, Volborn Tyrants. Well, can maybe bounce it with the Gaze if they bring it back. Otherwise, I'm fine to take 2. Overlord will mill a whole bunch. They might be playing with a new 4-mana broken Reanimator spell. And then trying to get back a whole bunch of 7-drops at once. Alright, the Lute's nice. So I'm really just 2 lines away from a lethal Mathemagics. Opponent has Fix What's Broken, bringing back double Voltborn. That's good value. Can bounce one of them at least. And then if there's no relevant interaction, we should still be able to combo next turn. This is not quite a lethal attack. Could have bounced while they were tapped out, in case they destroy their own creature in response. But we would have had enough mana regardless. So yeah, even on a mulligan, this deck doesn't... Ooh. Well, never mind. Now our opponent can make us discard a card. So got punished for not just taking the hits and keeping 2 cards in hand. Because that Mathemagics would have been game over. Yeah, and that's just a Lute. Well, that's unfortunate. You live, you learn. Ral Zarek, a new Planeswalker in the format. Yeah, otherwise I just take 6 more damage, discard the Proctor's Gaze, and then Mathemagics is game. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw with a keepable hand. First tier, turn 2 Rampant Growth, and then turn 3, maybe play the Lute. Opponent on what looks to be a sacrifice deck. Hopefully the first tier survives, because I don't have anything going on turn 2. So black, green. And another freebooter, that's fine. Alright. So can get a mountain here. The second Lute's unlikely to be super relevant. And we'll still just take 3. Don't want to give them a treasure. Witherbloom Charm. Sack to draw 2. And there's our Mathemagics, so yeah, we've got all the pieces we need. Just a matter of getting enough lands in play. Still try and play the Lute first, which would give enough mana for Lessons from Life plus Gaze. I see, opponent's trying to reanimate. And now their creature dying also drains for 1. I guess I'll take the trade. Can maybe bounce the Cauldron. Alrighty, so we'll start here. Put in a tapped starting town. And then I can both Shared Roots and Gaze, and then next turn we should have enough for a lethal Mathemagics. Nothing too scary for them to reanimate, so we can wait on bouncing Cauldron. Forgot whether or not I could have drawn a card with a Lute. Probably could have. Opponent attacks. Can still take it. Is this a sneak card? Nope. Take 3. And another Witherbloom Charm. In response, we'll bounce the Cauldron. Opponent gets to draw 2. Although soon enough, they'll get to draw a few more than 2 cards. So I've got them covered. Don't you worry. 3 mana remains. And just replaying the Cauldron once again. Alright, so the coast is clear. And X equals 6 should do the trick. Draw 64 cards. And there we go. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a keepable hand. Turn 2 Shared Roots, maybe turn 3 Gaze. And then ideally Mind into Matter for 4, putting in the Lute. So let me get a forest so we don't have to take damage off starting town as much. Facing mono black so far with the Silver Tongue. Right, don't mind seeing that. So, could also tap out for the Lute while we are somewhat certain that it's gonna stay in play. And that'll double our mana for next turn. If I had a land in hand, it would be different, because then Gaze would guarantee Mind into Matter for 4. But I think we can afford to just spend a turn to cast a Lute. And Mono Black is not going to have clean answers for a resolved artifact. Alright, they are playing the Demon package. Okay, maybe trying to bounce that one. So I can still Mind into Matter for X equals 3, and then Proctor's Gaze afterwards. I guess I could have done it for 4 actually, my bad. Alright, so this goes into play tapped. You have to be doing the Lute math, doubling our mana, essentially. Although a second Lute is not gonna quadruple it, since it's still limited to 1 land, making 2 mana. So I'll take 1. Wait and see what they play. The Tragedy Feaster to synergize with the Unholy Annex. I guess we'll bounce the Feaster itself. I have plenty of cards I can discard to it. And then we don't take damage of the Annex. Maybe the Lute could have gone here, actually. Alright, so options aplenty. Could Mind into Matter for 10. And then next turn we should probably win the game. Alright, so can put in another Lute. This one draws. We have our Mathemagics in hand. And then I'll still be able to Gaze. Which I guess I could do now, I could wait. Alright, so get to discard 5 cards. Glimpse, first tier. And what else? Another Lute. Another first year. And maybe a Lessons from Life. Yeah, we should be good. Silver Tongue hits for 1. Can afford to take it. And the Feaster's back. Got bad news. And then Mathemagics for 6. Should do the trick. Unless they have a Duress left over. But I guess we're already in the end step. Alright. Yeah, against mid-range decks, we usually have a pretty good time, since they're not fast enough to go underneath our combo, and we have time to set up. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the play. This hand has a lot of board wipes. No green mana, no ramp. I don't think we can keep. This is a bit more balanced. So I can go tapped Mistrise, turn to Starting Town, get a Forest, and then play the Lute. And then, yeah, Mathemagics as our win condition, so we just need to hit a few more ramp cards. Facing blue-black, so things might get a bit tricky. Reenact the crime, I see. Opponents on the Omniscience lifestyle. And Glimpse. Get a Forest. Need to make sure to play the Starting Town next turn before it's too late. And then I need 7 lanes in play for Mathemagics to be lethal. Opponent discarding to hand size. A Lessons is nice. Put a land in play. And then I can still Splatter Technique to draw. And then I'll have 7 cards in hand, so the Lute can draw as well. Okay, not bad. I don't think we'll need Pyroclasm. So yeah, next turn Mathemagics is game. The only drawback of winning with Mathemagics as opposed to milling the opponent out is that we don't get to see their entire deck, since they're just holding it in their hands. Alright, there we go. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. We have some ramp, some interaction. Hopefully we'll find a Lute or Mathemagics at some point. Definitely easier to win with a Lute in play, but we can technically get to 14 mana without it. Facing black-green. And get a mountain. Our hand is shaping up nicely. A Dragon Storm from our opponents. Okay, so this turn there's nothing I necessarily need to bounce, so we'll go for Lessons. This enters tapped, so the first year we'll have to wait. I see the Annex. So can expect the new 4-mana demon next turn. So, that being the case, how do we want to proceed? Probably a turn for Proctor's Gaze, which doesn't really leave enough mana for anything else. I can play the first year but not Rampant Growth. Yeah, I guess that's fine. We'll see if they feel inclined to remove it, or if they want to progress their own game plan. Another Annex. Okay. I guess we'll bounce one of the enchantments. Alright, so this is probably a good turn for a large Mind into Matter. X equals 6. Hope to draw the Lute. We did not. I'll go for land instead of the first year. And then I guess we're attacking. Discard a card to hand size. Probably Pyroclasm. Annex is back. And opponent's got the Hex for the first year this time. Okay, so could always just Mathemagics to draw a whole bunch, but we're still looking for the Lute, so I could maybe Lessons from Life to try and find it first. Let's see, if I Mathemagics for 4, that would be 10 mana, which I'm not quite there yet. Can do it for X equals 3, and then I get to draw 8 cards. But I wouldn't have the mana to then play the Lute afterwards. So I think we start with the Lessons. Found the Lute, perfect. So I can play it. And then I can still Shared Roots. So even if they have an answer to the Lute, we're getting ahead of mana. And sure, we'll play the first year as well. And if they can't remove anything, Mathemagics is game. Would not be surprised if our opponent's running the Pox, since all their lands can produce black mana. Never mind, now Basing Say as well. Alright, either way, Mathemagics for 6. Maybe we'll get Adventurous and cast it for 7. Could do it for quite a bit more. So yeah, we got to see this Mathemagics combo deck in action. It will definitely suffer against super aggressive decks, especially ones backed up by burn spells, since those can quickly get on the board with haste creatures and burn us out, and then our bounce effects are not going to be super effective. But against anything more mid-rangey or slower, we usually have time to set up. Even some of the ramp decks, we can wipe the board and get rid of all the ramp creatures, and then eventually take over with a Lute, which has been quite impressive at doubling all our mana, and eventually sometimes drawing a few cards as well. And then of course Mathemagics, a pretty clean win condition that can also double up as card draw while you're still setting up. So yeah, overall quite happy with where this deck ended up. Don't expect it to be super competitive in the best of one ladder, since the metagame tends to be quite aggressive, but you can certainly catch some people off guard and you will have some pretty favorable matchups in there too. So yeah, that's going to do it for today's gameplay. Want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.